was so bright. The old neighborhood was so alive. And every kid on the whole damn street was gonna make it big and not repeat. Now the neighborhood's cracked and torn. The kids are grown up, but their lives are worn. How can one little street swallow so many lives? Chance is grown, nothing's free. Longing for you. We're back.
You're between two dumbbells. I'm your host, Skip Hill, and I'm bringing over 40 years of bodybuilding experience to the table, including over 24 years of online coaching. I'm joined today by my co-host, Dr. Marv, also known as the Educated Meathead. This show can't work if one of us isn't super smart, and that's not me. For each show, we posit a thought about a training exercise or training methodology, and then we deep dive into the minutia. We might argue and debate, or we might agree and tell each other how smart we are. At the end of the discussion, we both decide if we smash or pass the topic of the day. Of course, we'll also be doing another segment of Intimate Time with Skip and Dr. Marv, and then we'll finish, as always, with a few listener questions, typically, though not always, related to a past show. Remember, every time you comment on a show on YouTube, you'll be included in a drawing at the end of each month to receive a TEAMSKIP t-shirt. And then I hit my mic. And Dr. Marv's online bodybuilding anatomy course. The more times you respond, the better your chances of winning. We'll post the winner for the month on my Intense Muscle IG account. And we'll also reach out to the winner via their YouTube account. I think we just announced the winners for the month of April. Good deal. So we're working on the May protein giveaway. We're working on the May online bodybuilding anatomy program giveaway and another TeamSkip t-shirt. Dr. Marv, I've got the deposit today. You good with that?
Yep.
I want to go old school. I always want to go old school because I think there's a lot of old school methods that have been lost in the progression over the last 20, 25 years. One of those is the old school sissy squat.
I know a thing or two about training, but I built a reputation in the bodybuilding industry for removing skin. If you have too much skin, call me. Remember, skin is overrated.
And I say old school because I don't think there's really a new school one. I think the new school version of the sissy squat is arguably not a sissy squat. And I want to know what you think, because I think that the old school version is not even close. It's just so far superior that I don't know how it's been lost. Probably because I think we have come to want to rely on machines. And with the sissy squat, we have a little, it's not a machine, but it's a piece of equipment. The sissy squat, what do we call it? Sissy, the machine sissy, does it have a name? I don't even know. And maybe we just call it a sissy squat because that makes us reference it and go, oh, okay, that's what it is. But I think it's a bad label. I think it's misleading, and it doesn't work the rectus femoris anywhere near close to the old school version. And I want to take those two versions, the old school and the new school, and then compare them and get your thoughts on the comparison with, say, something like a leg extension for rectus femoris development. So I throw that posit at you. What do you think out of the gates? That is.
Yeah, old school sissy squats are dead. Nobody does them. Yeah, I don't know why that foot platform thing got the name of the sissy squat. If you try to mimic an old school sissy squat, you're going to rupture an ACL. So you do it totally different. Now, it is a nice little addition. It's more, I consider that little foot platform thing more of like a finisher, right, than a meat and potatoes movement. So there's some benefit to it. But yeah, I agree. It's nowhere near it.
So I think we can both agree, though, it's an effective exercise
yes,
on
but
its
it's
own.
not rec fem like you just said. Yeah, correct. So what we need to do is let's show the anatomy first in case people aren't familiar, because the rec fem is the one head that acts differently. And then we could break all of those down. Plus I have 2 other ones that could be really helpful, especially if you're garage gym training or your knees can't handle the old school sissy squat like mine can. And I'll talk about why that might be the case. But let's just do the quick anatomy breakdown. I think that'll help a bunch of people. And I actually have to officially say I'm changing my tune a little bit on leg extensions based on some research that I was not familiar with.
Okay.
I have to publicly say I need to change one of my stances, or put that in as a caveat. All right, so here's your quad. It has 4 heads. Well, maybe, actually. All right, Skip, so here's another one. In 2016, a study came out saying there might be a 5th head of the quad. And in that study, 100% of the cadaver people had it. 2 other studies looked at it, and that ranged anywhere from 30% of people having it to 100% of people having it. So once again, to keep you up at night at 2 a.m., some people have a 5th head of the quad. So here is your rectus femoris, and I'm going to just keep that in mind. So the rest of your quad, here's your quad sweep, your vastus lateralis. Here's the deep muscle, your vastus intermedius. And here's your teardrop, the vastus medialis as well. But if you see where these, and guess what? They all share a common quad tendon, right? So I have always said rotating your legs in a leg extension doesn't do anything except adding shearing forces on your knee.
Mm-hmm.
There is 2 papers that say, you know what, that might not be 100% true. However, I still going to go, I don't want excessive rotation, but we'll talk about that. But look where these attach, right? On your femur. But the rectus femoris crosses the hip joint and actually attaches to your pelvis. So because of that, it acts differently. So in order to fully lengthen this, we need hip extension and knee flexion, which is the opposite. So the rectus femoris behaves differently than the rest of the quad. We good with that breakdown?
I am. Yep.
Cool. So we'll get out of that. So the rectus femoris does not have a lot of activity on traditional compound quad movements, right?
Great.
Because it's not getting that. Now, that's also why when you do Bulgarian split squats, the top of your quad is destroyed because you're putting a loaded stretch on the rectus femoris, especially if you don't do a lot of rec fem direct training. That's why your glutes and your quads are destroyed when you do split squats, especially if you're doing John Meadows drop set of death with that brutal hold in the bottom stretch position.
Okay, can I real quick? I want to ask about this exercise because I want you to clarify. The rec fem, rectus femoris is,
we'll call rec fem for
rec
short.
fem, is getting a lot of work in the Bulgarian squat. I just said squat. I'm gonna try that again. The Bulgarian.
Aren't you the literary guy between the 2 of us?
Exactly. Not terribly well spoken 100% of the time. The Bulgarian split squat gets a lot of rec fem activation. Correct me if I'm wrong. From the back leg.
That's exactly what I'm referring
the front.
to.
And
I should have clarified.
I think that's important because I know I've heard it several times and I'm thinking, okay, but should it? And that brings, I don't want to get ahead of the conversation, but what I'm saying is I tend to look at a lunge or a Bulgarian squat. I'm going to have a hard time with this. I'm going to have a hard time just giving everybody a heads up. I'm going to struggle with this. We're going to call it the Bulgarian split squat. So I'm going to refer to it as its acronym BSS.
There we go.
That way I can't screw it up. Doing the BSS or a lunge, could it be argued, because I would argue this, that the back leg is not to be used for drive, but for balance? I'm not saying it can't be, because I can understand that you will get, like, if you're going real heavy and you're able to use both as I don't want to say prime movers, but for lack of a better term, okay. I don't approach the lunge or the BSS that way. I'm thinking of it as front leg is the driver. The back leg is for essentially balance. So again, I don't want to get ahead of myself or go down a rabbit hole, but I think it's important to clarify for the people listening that it can be a rectus femoris, not dominant, but strong exercise, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It depends on how you're using those two exercises, lunges and BSS.
Yeah, it should, in theory, it should be a kickstand. Same with like a B stance squat or RDL. But a lot of people will drive, especially when you're going heavy. Like when my knee could handle split squats, I would do John Meadows' drop set of death, and I would start with 120s in each hand. Hell yes, I'm using that back leg a little bit. Like it was weird where I could split squat with 150 in each hand for sets of 15, but I had a hard time doing squats at 3 plates aside for a while. Like it's just, some people just have weird strength parameters where they're just naturally involved. That might be from my running, my triathlon days. I don't know. But yeah, on paper in a vacuum, that back leg should be for balance. But when you're going heavy, you're going to have to drive off of that. But then you could also say, hey, I'm getting a lot more rec fem activation if I'm driving off the leg. So I've literally had programs, especially for garage gym people today, is minimal drive off the back leg with your split squat or lunge. The next time as a variation, use that back leg. So it's a way to keep adding different stimuluses week to week.
And I can see the argument of, well, why not have it do a lot of the work and go heavier versus it not doing much of anything at all? You get twice as much work out of it. Okay.
It's variation. So that way you could cycle through stuff because you're not going to do, you could do the same basic movement pattern, but you could change the emphasis slightly for one training block versus the next.
Right.
Or 1 week in, 1 week out. That'll be really important when we answer one of the listener questions at the end of this, of having a rotation of movements, especially if you're progressive overload logbook driven, like we know I am very big on. So yeah, having that variation is different. But yeah, I think the old school sissy is pretty spectacular. Now, it is going to have a hell of a lot of quad. So if we recall from the squat episode where, moment arms with the distance from the weight and the joint being used, whichever moment arm is longer gets more activation. So the old school sissy squat is brutal on quads. The new school, yes, it's still brutal on quads, but you're not having that massive change in a stretch position.
Well, and let's point that out. I mean, let's talk about the visual. Let's talk about the position then of the hips versus the knees versus the ankles between the old school version and the new school version.
Yeah, because the biggest thing is one is hip flexed, one is hip almost extended. And that's the difference with rec fem. That's why, once again, a squat pattern, no matter you're using free weights or a machine. So yes, that applies to leg presses, V squats, hack squats, pendulums. When your hip is flexed, remember active insufficiency because it crosses the hip joint and your knee's bent, right? That's going, or knee is going to be straightened. It's so short it doesn't generate a lot of force. Now, I will say I don't think leg extensions or sissy squats are absolutely necessary for like great leg development. I think some of it's genetics, but I'm going to choose a compound movement over an isolation movement for quads every day of the week and twice on Sundays. I don't know how you feel about that statement. When I talk with Dante, he's like, yeah, like I don't see that as a necessity. But it is nice for pre-activation or, finishing it off or getting blood in it. So to each their own. I think also like you need to look at your physique. And it also, I could be biased because with my messed up knee, I can't do old school sissy squats. Like when I filmed the tutorial for a client that Chris is putting up on the screen, and we'll show mine and yours, like that set my knee back 6 months. So it is what it is, because we do know there is a lot of shearing force in the knee joint in the bottom of the sissy squat. So if you already have a knee issue, a knee complaint, that's going to be brutal on it. However, what's interesting though is, and there's never been a study on an old school sissy squat, so we are extrapolating from other studies. The bigger the knee flexion, the bigger the quad recruitment. But anybody's ever done it's going to say, yes, it is murder on your quads, even body weight only. Like body weight only sissy squats, you do sets of 20. Oh my God. especially if you're doing rep tempo. Olivia O'Need, Paul O'Need's wife, she does blood flow restriction sissy squats. I mean, good God almighty. Kudos to that woman, because I'm not doing that. But there is some biomechanical adaptations for people with healthy knees, which is interesting. As a knee goes past 90 degrees of flexion, it'll actually reduce some of the compressive forces on the knee, so long as you don't have any structural changes. So for me, I have no meniscus. That is my shock absorber. I can't do that. But if you don't have knee issues, it sounds weird because, certain people in the online space say, oh, never train a joint past 90 degrees. That's absolute hogwash.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we get past 90, things change to where contact forces change. You're actually increasing space behind the kneecap, which takes compressive shearing forces off. So going deeper in a sissy squat, as weird as it sounds, if you have healthy knees, is probably a little bit more protective than partial ranges of motion. Again, so long as you don't have the structural changes that I have.
Sure. And I have a history with my knee as far as osteoarthritis, loss of articular cartilage. At the same time, I do not have an issue doing the old school.
I'm
sissy
jealous.
Squat. So it's kind of an odd thing. I think it comes down to what the issues are with your knees, not necessarily whether you've had a knee injury or if you have knee issues. I also prefer this movement as a finisher.
Okay.
Versus and primarily because I don't think it's a big numbers movement for starters. Yes. I want to go back though to what you were saying about Dante and rectus femoris development. I agree with that. I think that extensions and sissy squats or exercises that are predominantly rec fem, you could leave them out completely and still develop an incredibly well-developed set of quads. I do think, though, that once you get that high level of quad development, there's something to be said for that thickness of the rec fem when you're on stage.
When you're split to the hips.
Yeah, it can really be, what comes to mind is Phil Heath. That development separating those massive quads really stands out where I mean my eyes go straight to it. Doesn't even go to the sweep or the adductors. It's literally like, wow, that is some really thick rec fem development right there.
But that is pulling out the scalpel or the sniper rifle when needed versus the beginning. So I was talking with the bodybuilder Logan Schultz, awesome amateur here in Houston. Shout out to him. Super cool dude. He's coached by Andrew, to where, he put a post up about, compound movement should be the vast majority of your workout. And he's like, I have all these guys saying adductors, abductors, and leg extensions is all you need to grow legs. I'm like, what?
Wow.
And he's like, they're all sub 200. I'm like, unless you're Keon. So Keon is on record when he was on Think Big saying, what's your favorite quad developer of all time? He said leg extensions.
Oh, wow.
So tell me you're the genetic elite without telling me you're the genetic elite.
Sure.
He also said he didn't train hamstrings until he had already made it to the Olympia. So we should not take any training advice from him because he is alien. He is not human. He is incredible. That's not me hating on him, but quit taking advice from genetically blessed people. Build the majority of your leg size with heavy compound movements. And then when you need that extra thickness, then you could bring them in. However, I do see the argument of, you could do your isolation stuff first before your heavy compounds to kind of like pre-fatigue that. But I'm with you. The old school sissy squat, that's such a big stretch early on until you're warmed up. I don't like doing the old school right away. That is a finisher. I could feel much better about a somersault squat, a reverse Nordic, or a leg extension, or even the new school sissy squat, which has got to come up. Like, could we call it almost like a Roman chair? Like, I know it's not technically a Roman chair, but
we need to get
Roman
it
squat,
needs to be a different label,
something.
Though.
Yeah, correct.
Because it's very, very misleading. And then what you get is you get someone saying, well, I finished with sissy squats, and that's not, to me, that's not a sissy squat.
Correct. Yep. So you could do those. I feel a lot better about people doing those as their opener, but not the old school sissy. Yeah. And again, Skip and I have been doing this. You've been training, what, 40 years? I've been training 17 years. I have so many injuries I should not be training. Like, when you're injury free, you're young, you're Gumby. I know this is nails on a chalkboard. Hell, you might have turned it off already. But if you want to be doing this for decades, you need to think about joint preservation, because it's usually joints going that ends a career, unless there's health concerns when you're not taking care of yourself, doing what you're supposed to do, especially if you're in that side of things. But if you want to be doing this for decades, you really need to be smart about movements. And just because you could do a movement for the first 10 years of your lifting career, if it changes, don't force it. Because guess what? We're not power lifters. We're not strongman.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is mandatory. It might change, right? So pay attention to your body's feedback and go from there. But yeah, do you ever add weight to the old school Sissy, or are you doing body weight only?
No, it's typically body weight only.
Okay.
What I do is, and primarily because I finish with them. So what I'll do is, based on the level of fatigue at that point, that will tell me, how slow am I going to do them? Am I going to pause in the bottom? Am I going to be further back?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I going to be a little bit more upright when I, kind of come out of the hole? It just depends on fatigue. If I start adding weight to an exercise like that, I feel like I might compromise the form too much, when all I'm really trying to do at that point is trying to open up and get as much of a stretch out of the rec fem at that point that I can. And I do something I think a little bit different than most people do. And that is, in the bottom position, I will still roll forward another inch or so. So it's kind of this is the best way, and you can see it when you're watching it as far as the visual, but it's almost as if I'm not going up and down, but I'm almost kind of a pendulum type of movement, where coming out of the hole, I'm pushing my feet and the floor away from me and pushing myself back and up instead of.
So so to clarify, you're doing it correctly. You're driving the knee forward.
Or toes. My visual is the toe. My cue is the toe. Where I'm trying to drive like the floor under me. I'm trying to push forward.
Yes.
I drive back.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah,
absolutely love that.
And I just want to touch on the extensions real quick. Going back to them, there's two main reasons why I do leg extensions. Number one, to warm up and get blood in there, and to make sure that my knees feel good. And I start very, very light. We're talking 3-4 plates, and then I jump up from there. So number one is I warm up. Number two is I like to, when I'm training quads, I like to hit a couple compound exercises, and then I put extensions in for no other reason than to kind of catch my breath while my breathing is kind of returning to normal, so that when I go to the next compound movement, it's not 3 compound movements in a row that I'm absolutely destroyed when I get to that third compound movement, and my lungs are trying to keep up. So it gives me a little bit of a back off, if you will, or I kind of get to catch up with my breathing before I go into that third compound movement.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So let's talk about the modern before we go to leg extensions. And then I would like to bring up reverse Nordics and somersaults.
Okay.
So so the modern one, do not, and I don't usually make ultimatum statements on this show. This is an ultimatum statement. Do not do what you're about to see on the screen when somebody is trying to keep their hip extended and fold their body back like they're an R. And as you see on the screen, that is why. That is a great way to completely rupture your ACL. Do not do that. Now, it is job security for me if you do that. But
especially in the Houston area.
Correct, yes. But I do not want anybody to have to go through that, because that is a 1-year minimum. It takes 2 years for the best type of graft for ACL reconstruction, which is patellar tendon, because there's bone on each side. It takes 2 years for that to fully assimilate in your body, to fully heal. Do not do that, because also the stimulus, you're not getting a massive stimulus compared to heavy squats, hack squats, whatever. So do not do that. I will do blood flow restriction for the modern sissy squat, and I have yet to, with body weight only, do the full 30, 15, 15, 15 reps continuous that I talked about from Jeremy Lenicky. God, it's freaking brutal. So valuable, but let's call them Roman squats. Let's try and start that trend.
Okay.
That's just off the top of my head. Maybe I might have seen somebody call it that, because it's not technically a Roman chair, but it kind of looks like a Roman chair for your legs, right? So
branding is everything. We could call it the skip squat.
We should call it the Marvin. No, I don't want my name. I don't want my name attached to that though, because that's not good enough.
The Marv Sissy. How about the Marv Sissy squat? The modern Marv Sissy squat.
Yeah. Oh god,
there's an acronym in there.
Yeah,
right?
there we go. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, there's that. But again, way less shearing forces on the knee, but it is more of a traditional squatting motion. Now you can though you can make it brutal as hell, but make sure the leg pad is supporting you. Make sure your lower leg, your shin is perpendicular to the floor. So if you don't want to, that's adjustable.
That's where I was gonna go.
Okay.
Absolutely horrible. It's funny that there are still manufacturers out there in 2025 who will make mechanically incorrect equipment.
Yep.
So it is vitally important that if you don't have that roller pad that goes essentially over the foot at the top of the ankle, if that doesn't adjust to allow your lower leg to be perpendicular to the floor, if that angle is open and your foot is out, if you can take that piece of equipment and throw it in the dumpster, even if you don't own it, take it out of the gym and throw it in the dumpster, because you're saving so many people from a potentially disastrous knee problem. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely one of the most horribly incorrect, mechanically incorrect pieces of equipment or things you could do in the gym. It turns my side. And I know because I, like a dumbass, did it. And it's, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but the point is I have the picture I told you on Instagram and I didn't know, but the knee was bothering me that day. And I thought I probably shouldn't use this, but I did. And that was me that day standing at the top of that giant water slide that lasted over 2 years, because that is when my knee problems started. They didn't start. They were exacerbated that day because of an existing issue that cost me over 2 years of rehab. And I say about an inch and a half to this day, about an inch and a half, maybe an inch and 3/4 on my quads that I have yet to regain from prior to that injury in 2020. It pains me.
So I joke, people who make equipment like that order their filet mignon well done with a side of ketchup.
Yeah.
Like, way to just ruin stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a buddy, or he used to do this, I don't know if he does now, Throne Ruiz out in Palm Desert. Really good friend, awesome dude. He looks crazy right now. Good amateur. He used to do like Smith squats with his legs in that old school sissy thing. And I was like,
really?
Damn. Yeah. Brutal. I was like, interesting. I've never done that. I typically do goblet style or body weight only BFR, but he swore by that combo.
Wow.
I was like, man, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
But brutal. So that is a variation. I've never done it. But he swore by it, and dude is strong as an ox. So
can we agree? I think we're on the same page with this, but tell me what you think. I'm not saying that the new school sissy squat or the Roman chair squat, if you will, is a bad exercise. I don't think you're saying that either.
It's just not doing what people think it's doing. Right. They lump it in as the old school. No, it's not a rec fem based movement. It's a different version of a quad based squatting motion.
Okay, so how did we get away from how did we forget?
Yeah.
Or how did we shelf the old school sissy squat?
I think you're right. I think people go, well, it's body weight.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be helpful.
Okay.
I am seeing a lot more sissy squats on the hack Tom Platt style. With my knee, I've never tried it. I've never programmed it. I'm seeing a little bit more people do the sissy squat on the hack like Tom Platt did. I would rather just do the old school or hold a weight if you need to, or a weight vest.
Now, I
To
will
each
say
their
this, I
own.
can see the benefit of the fixed machine because
Yep.
the path is the same every time.
Mhm.
I-
Yep.
I'll tell you, there's one thing I don't like about the old school sissy squat, and that's this. I don't like, because I'm OCD, and I'm
Mhm. One arm
holding
only,
out to
yeah.
the side. That's
Yeah.
not symmetrical to me. You'll
Mhm.
notice on my version in the video, I'm holding it in front of me, holding onto something in front of me, or slightly higher, so
Mhm.
that there's no left-right
Yeah.
issue. There's no
Yep.
imbalance
Yep.
there.
Yep. Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's more OCD people out there just like me.
But it's also really hard and humbling. And
Oh, yeah.
again, people, what machine gets used in the gym, unless you're the term, I'm going to steal an old head, like you call yourself, and I guess I'm getting up there with my training age, is what machine gets used? The one that people could put 10 plates aside on
Sure.
versus the Panada or the pendulum, aka the Humbler, where 2 plates they're struggling.
Yeah.
How many times have you seen somebody load up a heavy machine, get buried, take it off, and then go do the one they could do it for the Instagram and feel good about it? So I think that's a combination. But and then if you have any knee issues, you're not doing an old school sissy squat. You're just not. So
Right.
that could be it. But I think it's body weight only. It's really hard.
So basically, it's kind of the push-up version
Mhm.
of the bench press, where it's like, well, why would I do push-ups
Yep.
when I could do bench press
Mhm.
or
Yep.
a hammer
Or
strength?
pull up versus pull down.
Exactly.
I think it's valuable. I wish I could do like the brutal, crazy shit of leg extension, like Dusty talks about when his first trainer like literally tried to kill him on the leg extension. Like, I wish I could do that. Not like, oh, I'm missing the movement, I need rec fem development, because I found ways to train it regardless. I wish I could do that to where you're doing just insanity iso holds, drop sets, just Widowmaker style leg extensions just for the fun of it. But from a development standpoint, yeah. But
Well,
yeah.
let's segue then into that, because I'm
Okay.
curious how the leg extension stacks up to the old school sissy squat versus the new school sissy squat / Roman chair squat from a rec fem standpoint, as far as, and I don't know if we can put percentages on it. I don't know if we can compare the load of the
So
extension
yeah,
to the
because
sissy
like
squat.
nobody's ever looked at a sissy squat in research with EMG, and nobody's ever looked at the modern. So according to the data and what most people think for rec fem, leg extension is key.
Wow.
Is the king, right?
Okay.
Because it's never been fair. So like we're extrapolating the sissy squat. I mean, just do it though. Because remember once again, what is research? What studies, anecdote, and preference? Do an old school sissy squat, do a modern sissy squat, do a leg extension. What two feel the most similar? The leg extension, the old school sissy squat, especially if you do the leg extension, how I think is superior.
Right. It depends on how you do it too.
Exactly. So, yeah, let me just break down some research. So I've always been big on, it's a common quad tendon, like I said in the intro. So quit rotating your feet, because it's a way to add a bunch of potential negative stress on the knee without getting any benefit. So I have to make a retraction saying, well, there is 2 papers, but we're going to talk about, there might be some holes in the papers and some limitations, but 2 papers saying actually having internally rotated versus neutral versus externally rotated tibias might actually make a difference. So
I wondered that.
So
Because
I will
of the
admit,
attachment.
yes. So I might have to retract that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm always going to go do the angle that feels the best on your knees, right? So one study I could break down really well. The other study, I could only get the abstract. I couldn't get the full text article. And that's me knowing which sites to do. So once again, how many people of these PubMed warriors are only going to read an abstract, not look at the whole research? So I could say, this is what the abstract says, but I don't know if that's factually true because I didn't read the whole study. So once again, make sure you're getting your evidence-based, the best scientific workout from people who are actually doing their due diligence. So we'll talk about the one that I can talk about. So for the vastus medialis, the teardrop, rotation of the leg didn't matter. And they found that the final 60 degrees of knee flexion, so 0 degrees is full leg extension, 90 degrees is full knee bend. right? So from 90 degrees to 30 degrees of knee flexion, the teardrop got the most activation. Rotation didn't matter. For the outer quad, the quad sweep, the vastus lateralis, it was interesting. The first 60 degrees, so 0 to 60, internal rotation helped the most. But then the final 30 degrees, 60 to 90, neutral was the most. So again, conflicting. And then in this study for the rec fem, lateral rotation mattered most. Range of motion didn't matter because it was involved the whole time. Now, a little bit of lateral rotation makes sense to me based on the direction of fiber. So I've always kind of gravitated towards a slightly tibial or shin bone external rotation. So your toes are angled slightly out. That also felt best on my knees. So that's what that thing said. Now, another one, where are my notes for this? I couldn't even look at the full study. So like, again, do we know? According to the abstract, which this doesn't make sense, it conflicts. Internal rotation got the teardrop and the quad sweep, and external rotation got the rec fem. So both studies said external rotation got the rec fem. Again, that makes sense to me based on the angle of the fibers, and it felt better to me, but that's conflicting. What was really cool, because typically, and what I do in the world of rehab, there is this big war going on of when do you do a leg extension, which is considered an open chain movement. By open chain, that means my feet are in the air. They're not anchored to the ground like a squat. Is when do you bring in open chain for ACL rehab versus closed chain, which is squat? And we do know across the board, closed chain, your foot's on the ground or on a leg platform, has way less compressive forces and way less strain on the ACL than open chain. So typically the thought process has been you only do 90 degrees of full knee bend to 45 degrees only if you're worried about any sort of ACL stress. Okay. But one interesting study, very interesting, found that you trying to contract your hamstrings with lighter load leg extensions, so 30% 1 rep max, so very light, so this is more rehab based, but people who try to contract their hamstrings 30% 1 rep max or less took away all the compressive forces on the ACL, which is wild. 40% reduced a ton. So somebody trying to physically contract, now again, these are college age, like blah, blah, blah. But it was really interesting, right? So it increased knee stability. So if you're somebody who has a bad knee like myself, has a history of an ACL tear, I found that really interesting. So that's pretty cool. And again, though, every study will find rec fem open chain has a lot more activation than closed chain. The last thing I will say is, and how I program 2 different styles of leg extensions. I program one where you're sitting upright, like almost leaning forward, because the rec fem crosses the hip joint. I'm getting it fully shortened. And I also have it to where you're trying to lean back. If your low back can handle it, even floating your hips up in the air a little bit to get the hip more extended than 90 flexion. That increases the stretch on the rec fem. And that, according to the research, 40 degrees of hip flexion, right? So that's kind of leaning back. You could see it on the screen with the tutorial of mine. That got, and their terminology cracked me up. I've never seen this in a study. That got extreme evidence of increased rec fem activation and no difference for the vastus lateralis and there was only strong evidence for the hip position not changing the teardrop. I mean, the quad sweep. They only looked at rec fem. They only looked at quad sweep, and reclining yourself back got way better rec fem activation, which makes sense because you're getting a loaded stretch. And I will usually program 2-to-1 ratio of, 2 times you're going to lean back to 1 time sitting upright, just because loaded stretching, getting that. How I do leg extensions on the screen, I do blood flow restriction, but to make it a little, because I can't handle heavy loads, and then to make it harder, I'm now using yoga blocks. In the video, I was just using the boxing mitts between my shin and the foot pad to increase the stretch. And now there's a company that makes that little add-on, and they're marketing it as, oh, you do this, your quads are going to be huge. So
Well, I think
we'll
for
just say
anybody,
that, yeah.
go ahead. For anybody following along, I think that they can see if you do the leg extension and you're essentially inclined back where the hips are more open, I would say it's exactly the same, but that's the whole point of the old school sissy squat.
Exactly.
So as soon as you open that angle up, you're getting so much more rec fem development, which brings me to the point of whether we think, or I think, that the old school sissy squat then is equal to or superior to a leg extension. And I'm going to go on record and say that I think it's superior to the leg extension. Arguably, I understand you could potentially increase the load substantially over time with the leg extension. I get that. But I would pose this to the listeners or the viewers. Try them both and tell me not just what's the most sore the next day. Because if you haven't done old school sissy squats before and you do them, you're going to be crippled. Trust me. But do them consistently and tell me that you don't feel that rec fem working arguably twice or 3 times as hard in that leg extension than the leg extension itself. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. So you could say that, and I get what you're saying. I'll be contrarian just for the sake of it and saying I'll lean towards the leaning back leg extension if you could get yourself farther back because you have more stability, and we know what I talk about stability, but both are valuable. But the key is, if you want to just destroy your rec fem, open up the hip angle, get out of this flex position. Now, if somebody can't feel their rec fem, then on a leg extension, or sissy squat, you'll feel it, but say for some reason they can't, you want to get the muscle fully short, like we talked about with activations, do a couple light sets where you're literally almost leaning forward. And then you're holding that top position for a solid 5 seconds, squeezing your quad as hard as possible. That rec fem, you're getting it so short, you'll have to feel it. But yeah, I like what you're saying. I'll just be a little contrarian, but both are valuable. But yeah, it was cool that the research backed up what just you and I have anecdotally figured out over the years.
And there is a third option. Let's be fair. If you're not sure, superset them.
Yep.
Do the leg extension and follow up with sissy squats. If you're not very good with sissy squats, do the sissy squats first and then finish with the leg extension. Because I promise you, even with light weights, if you start with the sissy squat, you go to the leg extension, even with a lightweight, good luck getting even close to 10 reps on that leg. You're going to want to lean forward because you're going to want to make the leg extension less rec fem dominant so that you can get into the lateralis and the medialis a little bit more. I do want to go back real quick to the rotation at the hip. I was glad to hear you say that because I have always thought to myself, I don't see the value in rotating the hip or the knee out kind of laterally. I don't see that. I see that is a potential vulnerability and I don't see any benefit. But I have always thought if you get minimal internal rotation and do the leg extension because of where the quad's attached to basically the outside of the hip, I could see that. But here's the catch or the caveat. It's very easy, in my opinion, to get just a little bit too much internal rotation, and you cross the line very quickly. You want a little bit of internal rotation, but not much, because as soon as you go too far, it's just not. It becomes an awkward movement, and there's limiting factors like all the muscles of the hip, where you're going to have them internally rotated. If you go too far, it could be argued that one is going to be a little more internally rotated than the other because it can't be even from left to right. Completely even if you're just trying to maximize the internal rotation. So then you have all this bit of imbalance going on and you're trying to fight to hold that internal rotation. And it becomes this very complicated, awkward movement, which takes me to what you said, which I think is perfect. And it's pretty simple and makes sense. It's logical. You go with the natural groove or the natural feel. I tell this to clients all the time when they ask about foot position, knee position with squatting. Squat down with no weights. Just squat down right now. Because they're going to squat down in the most natural position that is best for them or is the most comfortable. And that is typically how you want to squat, because that's your natural position. And I think it differs slightly from person to person versus let's go old school again, where we used to force the knees forward or narrow versus that slight natural outward, where I'm just doing this to make the point. It's not straightforward like we used to force it in the 90s, which quite frankly puts your lower back potentially in a vulnerable position versus that natural, slightly just natural knee, hip, ankle position. So if it feels good and it feels normal, that should probably be the path that you take for extensions, for squatting, etc.
Yeah. So like we talked about with the calf training, avoid extremes because they're extremes. And most people will be lacking internal rotation on the right side. This is my theory. Most people's right foot is greatly restricted, especially the midfoot. We typically lose hip extension, internal rotation on the right side. I think it's because of driving, but also we've talked about before. Your right side of your body's heavier. More of your brain's devoted to the right side. When you stand relaxed, next time you're at an amusement park, standing in line for 3 hours to ride a ride, one, I hope the ride is worth it. But watch the person in front of you. When we stand for long periods of time, 9 times out of 10, the person locks their right knee out, shifts their hips to the right a little bit with a soft bend on their left knee. That's typically how we stand in a relaxed position. So all of those make it to where 90% of the time when I am checking somebody's pelvis or SI joints, whatever, or low back, whatever you want to use, they cannot raise the right leg as high when I'm doing a prone lying face down leg extension, and the right side hip is greatly lacking right internal rotation usually, right? If there's a difference. So yeah, if one foot's this way, all that's to say, if you get that much rotation on your left and that much on your right, just balance it out and do that.
What about the wallet? Did the wallet ever play into any of that?
Yeah, I'm sure that could be as well. Yeah.
I just didn't know if there was any truth to that or if it was just
well,
myth.
Yeah, well, old school chiros will say, yeah, that misaligns your spine. That's not evidence-based. Your spine doesn't magically go out of place and I magically put it back. But oh, by the way, even if you adjust the wrong side, it goes back to perfect. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. I almost dropped out of chiro school when they were trying to teach me that. And then, I had one more. Shoot, this is when I need to write it down, especially when I'm under the weather. You said something that was, and then, there is, this is my biggest gripe. There is a really popular movement assessment. It's an athlete movement assessment system. They force people to squat with their feet perfectly straight.
Oof.
And I'm like, that's a great way to sell your services.
Yeah.
Because people can't freaking squat without pain or get deep if you're forcing it. And if you're having like excessive, I know we're going off on a tangent, but if you're somebody who has excessive, the knees caving in, just half an inch wide, barely rotate your toes out. Magic. You don't need to do booty band nonsense crap, push it out. Just barely change your foot, barely rotate out. Case solved.
Yep. Great.
So 2 other ones I don't think are on people's radar. We've shown it before. The somersault squat. I freaking love it. I learned it from Dr. Scott Stevenson originally, who learned it from Joe Daniels. I used to do it on a Smith machine. Now I just do it with kettlebells or dumbbells. I like the heel elevation. So we've shown this before. That's my rec fem movement. Either it's blood flow restriction, leg extensions, or it's somersault squats. It's still not ideal or identical, but it's close enough. And especially if you're supersetting that. So my favorite current way to kill myself or torture myself or have fun, whatever words you want to use, is heavy 100 to 120 pound somersault squats directly into a hack squat. 3 rounds of that. My quads are so full of blood, man. I have a hard time bending my knees to take my squat shoes off.
What about extensions to somersault squat? Supersetted.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
By all means. Yep. And then reverse Nordics. Are you familiar with a reverse Nordic?
No, I should be, but here's what it is. I might see it
Mhm.
if you put it up on the screen and go, oh,
So this is a reverse Nordic.
oh, absolutely.
So that could be garage gym. Make it, I mean, if you want to, so this is off the top of my head. You want like the world's most brutal drop set, but it's a mechanical drop set. You could literally do sissy squats to a leg extension because you're increasing stability as you go. That's how I would do it. But you
Okay.
could play around with the order. But yeah, you could do that. And then, that's the old school sissy. So if we pause it there, so you could see, right? Most of my force is here. Look how big that moment arm is.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost behind your hips.
Yeah.
That's why it's so damn brutal. And then, I do just like you. If you notice at the end, I push my knee slightly forward.
Yep.
Filming this set me back 6 months. That's when I've learned I'm never going to force a movement I know I shouldn't do just for a client. Sorry. But yeah, reverse Nordics are another option as well.
It's funny. I never didn't know what they were, yet I used them, a variation of it coming back from my knee injury. This is about a year and a half after the knee injury was essentially rehabbed and I was starting to get strength back into the quads. And I would use, because I was very, very weak in my, my rec fem was very weak. So I would hang on to a tricep press down so that I would have weight resistance because I couldn't even handle just the body weight of going back very far. So I had that as resistance. And as I got stronger, of course, I used less resistance on the weight stack to where then I was able to, I was increasing the resistance on the quads by decreasing the resistance on the stack over, say, 2-3 months, to the point where then I was able to do it with body weight and then increase, of course, reducing the amount of weight or resistance allowed me to get that bigger range of motion when I was weaker. So then as I got stronger, I had that range of motion versus just trying to build the range of motion from, an inch to, 4, 5, 6 inches, that sort of thing. So
yeah, I'll use a TRX or a resistance band in office when we're as a regression. Yeah, I love it. So the cable stack is probably way easier. I could just use my cable machine. So once again, the smart guy learned something from the bro guy.
Exactly. Every now and then it happens.
Few and far between,
That's
folks.
right.
Don't get too worked up.
Every now and then.
So
where does that take us?
Yeah, smash or pass,
Yeah,
I guess. Are we there?
I
Are we
see.
going to remember to do it this time? All right.
I was waiting for that. I figured you were like, what? He's not going to forget to smash or pass today.
So you go.
Okay, I'll take it first then.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm smashing the hell out of the old school. I mean, that was the whole idea of the topic. I think that it should have never been shelved to begin with. The modern version is still a pass though, or I'm sorry, still a smash. If you're not trying to compare the two or substitute the modern version versus or for the old school version. They're both a smash, but they shouldn't be compared to each other because they're just arguably radically different movements. When we compare though the leg extension to the old school sissy squat, I'm still going to smash the old school sissy and I'm going to pass on the extension. I'm not saying the extension does not work and it's not a great movement. I will take the old school sissy squat though over the leg extension for rec fem. And that could be too because of individual thing. I have that knee where it's not an issue anymore as far as an injury, but I do not lock out extensions because I feel that there's gravel. There's like little rocks in there.
And the research is very clear on that. Like I said, like when you're coming back, you want to go not even more than 45 degrees of knee bend. You don't want to go because the compressive force, the shearing force, especially on the ACL, goes up a ton.
Well, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go on record and say that I think that the locked out position of the leg extension is overrated, whether you have injuries to your knees or not. I'm going on record and saying that.
Yeah, because you're trying to get a loaded stretch on a muscle that doesn't get a loaded stretch in traditional squatting. So I agree with that. Yep. Yep. And that's going to break a lot of hearts because a lot of people go,
exactly,
squeeze the hell out of it. But
oh, he's a pussy. You got to lock him out.
Now, if you're born with Teflon joints, great. But look who says that. People who just have gnarlier, bigger, sturdier joints than the average human.
And I wouldn't go so far as to argue this. If you're saying that the only way to do really productive hardcore leg extensions is to be able to lock out every rep, that's like saying the pec.
It's an ultimatum.
Well, and absolute, it's certainly an absolute statement. So it's much like saying then there's no sense doing machine flies if you're not going to go light enough to be able to hold every single rep at the top of, and then once you can't close and you can't close that rep, then you're done with the set. I would argue that if you were at 80 or 90% of that weight and you couldn't close at the top and you left a couple inches at the top, that there would arguably be more of a stimulus. So it's kind of it's not right or wrong. I think it's just a different methodology.
Yep.
I think they can both be used. I just think that the holding that top position of the extension is overrated.
Yeah, and you're doing it more for activation purposes than hypertrophy. So, what do you think of reverse Nordics and somersaults? I love somersaults, man, but also I'm biased because that's one of the few reckish feminist kind of dominant movements I could do.
Here's the thing: I'm not against either one of them. They're just not go-tos for me, I guess. I like the reverse Nordic in the sense that I've used it for a rehab type of situation. But it's just not a go-to for me. Somersault squat, same thing. I've tried them only once. I don't like that it's the weight. Like if I could have the weight behind me, like I could put it in my weight belt behind me, or there was like a belt squat machine to hook it, the resistance behind me, then maybe I could get into that. It's just not a go-to. I'm not saying it's bad, but
That's funny you brought up the belt squat. I've actually been wanting to try it on a belt squat to see, because to me it makes a hell of a lot of sense. The problem is I now train legs during the week and I don't have time to go to the gym that has the good belt squat. During the week.
And I think it would work because you could stand further away from the pulley.
I think it would be just money. The blood flow restrictions, funny, I did blood flow restriction. I tagged Joe Daniels, who I learned it from. Super smart, strong dude, best kettlebell guy in the world, or maybe not in the world. He's the best American at kettlebells. Like he represents USA in international kettlebell competitions. And I sent him BFR somersaults. He's like, yeah, I'm never, ever doing that. Ever. I was like, yeah, it was pretty brutal. Okay, so I smashed the concept of the old school sissy squat, but I have to pass in real life because I can't do it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And that breaks my heart. Same with leg extensions. God, I wish I could do them just so I could do the crazy shit I hear people see people do. I love somersaults. Reverse Nordics are more rehab based, variation, especially if you're a garage gym trainer. I agree. That's not going to be a meat and potatoes or a big one. But if you have healthy knees, the old school sissy squat 10 times better than the new school Roman squat. So I quit lumping that in with a isolation rec fem movement is the moral of the story. And the one ultimatum is do not do the whole lever system on the Roman chair squat unless you want to rehab a knee for the next 1 to 2 years.
Right.
Like you will lose majority of your quad gains, your body. There's something called reciprocal inhibition, autogenic reciprocal inhibition, where you're literally going to have to teach your brain how to fire your quad again post ACL reconstruction. Like that no bodybuilder wants to be there.
Yeah.
So Now, technically, you don't need to have an ACL repaired if you're not an athlete who's laterally cutting, but you're still rehabbing for a year, bare minimum. So that's mine. I know it's a little bit of a cop out, but that's my answer.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Good.
Let's. I think it's. What do we do? Transition to what is it? Intimate time?
I think it's
I
intimate
think it
time.
is. Oh, I'm on the hot seat. Oh,
You
boy.
are. Oh, and then shout out to the rugby team I treat. I finally got my jersey for this
Oh,
year.
nice.
There's my office. So they had their banquet with Saturday night, which was always fun.
Very cool.
Everything is all right. I got a beat from Kim, and she can do it all night.
Okay, so intimate time. Skip doesn't know the questions. The rule is he has to answer no matter what. And they cannot be anything bodybuilding related. So
All right.
the first 5 are very deep, thought-provoking questions.
Man,
Yeah, I know.
I like multiple choice better,
Yeah.
but
And
okay.
then the last 5 are super easy.
Okay.
And there is actually multiple choice. So funny you said that.
Nice.
Either or.
Okay.
So let's do the hard ones first. Number 1, what is something you believed strongly 5 years ago that you've completely changed your mind about?
God, 5 years ago.
Well, okay, it doesn't have to be, but years ago, like something that you've had a big change of thought or tune about.
I think that this is what comes to mind. Then, boy, these are difficult. These are deep.
Mhm. Yep.
I think that people, by and large, are shittier than I used to think. I know that sounds, and that might be my cynical side taking over, but I think I used to have a little bit more faith. Here's how it plays out. The older I get, I feel that people are actually shittier at their core than I thought they were when I was younger. And it could have been naivety, or it just could be because I'm getting older and I'm disappointed, I think, with people and their complete lack of compassion. Not as a rule across the board, but I see it more, or I notice it more, or maybe I just feel that way more.
Or it's modern society.
Could be.
I agree with you 100%. Okay, number 2, what is a memory you replay in your head when you need comfort or confidence?
Wow, I don't want to cop out and say that I don't. I probably do subconsciously, but I can't consciously think of anything that I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know that sounds like a cop out, but I can't. I don't have any.
So this will be the one time I allow that answer, because these are like, you'll think of something 5 hours from now and you'll miss it.
I might. I might.
So maybe you put it in post. We put it in post if it comes to you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 3, if you could ask one question to your younger self and get an honest answer, what would it be?
I could ask a question to my younger self. I always, and this is kind of embarrassing to say, but if I would have asked my younger self if I wanted to have kids, I would have said no. And had I had my way, I would have been incredibly disappointed and missed out on. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy but that was admittedly because I was very selfish. And, I guess I would have thought, my younger self would have thought that, a family or kids would have gotten in the way and been in the way of the things that I wanted to do. And I would have been massively, and was crazy wrong.
What is a habit or trait you picked up from your family that you're either proud of or working to unlearn?
Well, I don't think there's really anything that was negative that I need or have ever felt that I needed to unlearn. But it was a different time. So as an example, we did not as a family show, like we didn't hug, we didn't say I love you. I mean, I don't think I heard from my parents that they said they loved me, even though I knew that they did until I was my early 20s. I mean, it was just so it's something that I have taken into having kids and having a family, that you don't go anywhere. You don't get off the phone or leave without a kiss or saying, you know, I love you. It just does not happen in this house.
Nice. Okay, last difficult question. How do you recognize when you're starting to lose yourself, and how do you find your way back?
Sometimes you don't until you
So
until
it's
you
too
do.
late.
Yeah, exactly. Finding your way back is difficult. I think it's just the awareness. I think it's just literally going, okay, I am a chaotic mess. I've been a chaotic mess twice in my life in 55 years. And
It's not bad.
And sometimes people close to you tell you, and all that does is make some people deny it that much more. So there becomes an awareness. I don't know what it was or what it is. I think everybody has something that clicks. So I can't tell you what that was. And I don't know if there's anything that I purposely did to come back. It's just an awareness. And I think once that awareness hits you, I think then I can only speak for myself. Then it's wake up, get your shit.
Okay, easy ones. Waffles or pancakes?
Oh, waffles.
Since I had to change the damn question, since you broke my heart saying you bought Crocs, have you ever owned a pair of cowboy boots?
Absolutely. I still do. Lucchese, 1883. So I have a few pair.
How many speeding tickets have you gotten in your M5?
None on record. I have an attorney too, but they were both. I don't have any on my record.
Nice. I gonna need the name of your attorney. Mariano Rivera or Trevor Hoffman? Which one do you want to win the World Series?
Oh, Rivera.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a Padre guy, so
okay.
Of course, yeah. He was the best, man. Hell's Bells. Oh, yeah. I get goosebumps thinking about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, last one. Favorite soda or carbonated well, I said soda, but I don't think you drink soda. So no. Carbonated beverage of all time, Monster, right?
Monster Zero. White.
Yeah, that was. I mean,
I like different, but
yeah.
They
I actually bought one yesterday out at HEB, and I was like, I'm gonna get Skip's favorite. And I told it to my wife. She's like, oh, okay.
I'm not kidding. I order them on Amazon.
She's like, why did you get that? I was like, it's Skip's favorite. Like,
yeah, I order them on Amazon. I don't even get them. And I literally ordered, I order 4 cases at a time.
Nice.
Because I don't want to run out.
I just don't get enough kick, so I just do caffeine pills.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a lot more. But they got it right with white. The first flavor is the best.
Yep. Good. All right, you are off the hot seat. So we got up to 2 listener questions. We'll see how long this first one is.
Cool.
I've got very strong opinions about the first one, as I'm sure you do. And I think it's a great conversation. So we'll see how long it takes.
Okay.
If we don't get to the second one, we'll do it next week. So from the Sweat Machine, can you really, and this was in reference to the Dorian Yates episode, can you really expect to beat the logbook every week? I think if you're blasting for a goal of adding X amount of muscle or strength in a set time, it can be a beneficial tactic. But I hear Dr. Marv says But I hear Dr. Marv say it's his training SOP, standing operating procedure. That doesn't sound feasible to me, nor a reasonable expectation. Maybe I'm just jaded or have too much trouble growing, and I'm using that as an excuse. If I used a logbook for everyday training, expect to beat it regularly, I'd be very disappointed. Training for a powerlifting meet is a very different scenario. So I have specific ways of how I keep that in my SOP, but I don't know if you want to tackle that first.
I agree with a lot of what he's saying, but it just depends on the individual. As an example, I go back to the DC training that I did did it for about 3 years. 03 to 06, 02 to 05. It's in there somewhere. And the beating the logbook at that time was feasible because I was in my early 30s. Just had started competing consistently again because I was in Colorado. and was competing almost once a year, twice a year, something like that. Started competing again in 02. And it worked incredibly well at that time. Now that I'm older, it's just not possible. And it's not even really an injury or vulnerability type of situation. I agree with him. I think that if you're older, I mean, you can't increase reps and strength in perpetuity. It's just not going to happen. There are too many limiting factors. And it brings me back to the argument that it's a great way to grow. Progressive overload and focusing on the logbook is a great way to go. You're gauging very, very black and white variables based on progression. But you can also grow without that black and white progression of weights and reps. Example, time under tension and just intensity itself. So, and I would make this example. There was a time when I was in my mid 20s where I was curling, 135, 145 for reps. I curl, it's rare for me to go to 90-pound barbell curls these days, but my arms are vastly superior to what they were in my 20s. And obviously there's gear use, there's the years of training, but the point is it's not the only way to grow. So I agree with a lot of what he's saying. So we have to take into consideration variables like how long have you been training? Are you in your prime? Are all the other variables constant? I probably haven't kept a logbook. Kept them for years. I mean, I've got logbook. I literally have one down here from when I was 16 years old in 1985, 86 that my mom sent me with cheesy little things, notes on it, Gaspari, things like that.
Awesome.
And I Scotch taped pictures of Tom Terwilliger and Rich Gaspari to my refrigerator and to my logbook, Rory Liedlmeyer, things like that. I have those logbooks and they were very, very beneficial at that time. I haven't kept a logbook in I don't know how long. And yet I'm continuing to progress. I'm not necessarily bigger than what I was 10 or 20, 10 or 15 years ago. I'm 55. But there is still that, I would argue and say my chest is better than it was 15 years ago, but I'm not stronger. So there's all these avenues to get to this destination, and the logbook and progressive overload is one of them. And it's a good one. It might be a 6-lane highway that a lot of people travel on and they get there relatively quickly. There's a lot of other avenues as well. So I can see his argument, sure. But I will say that it still does work depending on, it can work very, very well depending on the variables.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's how you set up a progressive overload program is what matters. Progressive overload is the one scientific principle that applies to everything. That's how I live my life. It's a joke. But that's the one thing we know for a fact. So how you set up a progressive overload program is how it matters. And then I've also pivoted. I'm still doing progressive overload and logbooking different. So when you're very progressive overload driven, you cannot do the same movements every single week. That's when having 2, preferably 3 rotations of workouts comes in key. So if I do, my quad movements, week 1 are hack squats, week 2 is a Smith squat, week 3 is a pendulum squat. If I did hack squat every single Tuesday, at a certain point, progressive overload is going to teeter out. But because I'm only hitting that movement once every 3 weeks, and I'm doing other movements, I am probably going to get stronger in between. So that's really important. As is, I don't logbook, and I didn't say this, I don't logbook every movement. So the perfect example is biceps, which everybody will agree. People's arms get better when they quit hurling around super heavy barbells than they do more cable work, more concentration. So I don't logbook bicep movements in particular. I typically logbook tricep movements because those are typically compound, right? Or like we already talked about in depth. But yeah, biceps I won't logbook, abs I won't logbook, blah, blah, blah. So I don't do that. Now, I think progressive overload should be the foundation. You should spend the first 5 to up to 10 years chasing that. At least the first 3. I'd prefer 5
I don't
years.
disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Build your foundation. That's the shotgun or the shovel. Then you need to get out the sniper rifle or the scalpel. Then you need to do progressive overload. But the key variable is you're getting the activation and the tension where you want it. So now I still have a logbook, but my rule is if other muscles start taking over, I shut the set down. And then I'm going to try to increase the amount of reps with the same weight before some took over. So everybody knows I'm very open about this. Chest is my lagging body part, especially with the active labral tear, the active wrist tear, the bone chips. I'm not full stacking a machine press. I could do only 2 chest movements right now, but it's better than nothing. But I'm progressively overloading, meaning I'm only doing 155 pounds on a press, which people will laugh at, but I feel it in my chest. And, the first time I did that, and I'm also doing metronome, 3-second negative, 2-second hold in the stretch, contracting, trying to isolate the chest. And, week 1, I got 8 reps, and then rep 9, I felt my delt taking over. Okay, so I wrote that down. Same weight, but I'm trying to get to, 9 reps this time with my chest as the primary mover, then trying to get to 10. So now it's progressive overload, but tweaked to where muscle activation is still king. Does that make sense? So
sure, absolutely.
That's the harder way to do progressive overload, because you have to have the confidence and the strictness to be like, nope, I lost the target muscle. Right. And that's harder. So then now the goal is to get back. I mean, I'm going to still pretend like I could still heal like I did when I was younger, because even before I stepped in the gym, I'd already had 9 surgeries. So it's not like I have anything to compare with, but like my goal is to start getting up to the weights I was using within 20% and have that awesome activation. But again, yeah, you have to have rotations if you're progressive overload base. You just have to.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are times where I will come away
there's no way
from an exercise and I'll come back to it 3 weeks later and I haven't done it. And I'm like, wow, I'm stronger. I got 3 or 4 more reps, that sort of thing.
And you're going to have training blasts and training cruises. And then once you stall out, my rule of thumb is, depending on how advanced somebody is, it's 2 or 3 consecutive workouts where you stall. Like 1, that could be sleep. Now, hopefully, sleep you can't always control. You can control your hydration, like we've talked about. You control your nutrition, right? So control the variables. But you don't sleep. You get in a fight with your significant other. Something's going on in the family. Like 1 bad workout, I don't freak out. If it's somebody who's very advanced, who knows their body, and they say, hey, this is the second time that I didn't beat the logbook and it just doesn't feel right, I might change it. But for most people, 3 consecutive workouts, either you need a cruise or we're swapping the movement out. Because if you're doing a training blast, you might hit that movement, if you have 3 rotations, 4 to maybe 8 times maximum before you need a cruise. So like how you set it up, because yes, I agree. I even commented on YouTube. Yeah, if it was ad infinitum, we'd be bench pressing cars, and we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but I still think it's important through cycles. Like as an example, I am deep into prep right now, and I look at my strength at this point of prep versus where I was last year, and I'm clearly stronger than I was at this point last year. So I noticed that, and I appreciate that there has been progression there. What I'm saying from a logbook standpoint is I don't put as much emphasis on the workout to workout or, oh my gosh, this is just not enough progression. I want to see progression over what some people might call cycles or mesocycles, maybe is a good way to look. So, I will compare those. My leg strength right now is the highest that it's been since prior to the injuries. That's incredibly important to me. And that tells me there is progression there. So yes, I still think there should be progression, but there's just such a myriad of variables that can play into it. That doesn't mean that if there's not progression, that you're still not benefiting or that you're not growing. Regression, totally different.
Yep. And it's not just reps and load, rep tempo, feel, rest
Sure.
intervals.
Mhm.
You want to totally change your workout? Same movements, reverse the order.
Yeah.
That
Change the
totally
sequence.
changes things.
Sure.
100%. Yep. So like, it's not always reps. It's not always low. That's what everybody thinks too. But if you're a newbie, don't talk about what we talked about in the last episode, right? Like, put in the work, earn the right to bring out the scalpel or the sniper rifle.
Mhm. Agreed.
Good with that?
Absolutely.
We've gone an hour 20.
Let's leave that question then for the next show.
Yep.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yep. So I'll tell people what it is as a cliffhanger. We got a quick question about golfer's elbow.
Okay.
So Marco Ramus I8R. Now he specifically said golfer's elbow. So I'm assuming he is correct because tennis elbow, according to the data, is 3 to 10 times more likely than golfers. And I treat a lot more tennis elbow than golfer's elbow with lifters and bodybuilders. But so if you misspoke, just comment on one of the episodes if you hear this before it comes out. If not, I'll go with a golfer's elbow. Quick breakdown. I do plan to do full in-depth videos very soon about common weightlifting injuries. But yeah, that'll be the cliffhanger. You'll have to tune in next week.
Fair enough. I think with me over here boxing my microphone, that means we
Not
should
distracting at all.
Yeah, not at all. On that note, we got to get to getting with Skip and Dr. Marv splitting. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell. It should sound a little something like this. And if you didn't like the show, just pretend you did and like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell anyway. We want to hear your questions, feedback, and any ideas you have about future topics in the YouTube comments section. If your question or topic is chosen for the show, you'll go into a separate drawing. We will randomly choose one winner at the end of each month who will receive a 5-pound bag of TeamSKIP protein from TrueNutrition.com. Be sure to use the TrueNutrition.com link in the closing credits to save 10% on not just TeamSKIP protein, but on every supplement they sell. Not only do I use my TeamSKIP protein with my clients, but other top prep guys have their clients use my protein because it's that good. Dr. Marv, how could someone reach out to you if they have questions or they want to work with you?
So full transparency, I got a box from True Nutrition on Saturday, and there was 3 bags of TeamSKIP in there.
Nice.
Skip now owes me a check in the mail.
That's right. Check is in the mail.
So I'm most active on Instagram at dr.marvin.saysdc. My office is in the Houston Bay area. I do telemedicine, nutrition coaching all over Texas. If you're not in Texas, I do consults through theeducatedmeathead.com. So you're having injuries, you need help with something, you need help with posing, training, whatever. Schedule that. I got workout programs, seminar recordings, my online course, blah, blah, blah. But just reach out to me on Instagram. And that's all I got for now.
If you have too much skin, go to teamskip.com. And we have a little bit of merch there too.
Nice.
Of course, you can follow me on Instagram at Intense Muscle as well. Keep in mind that this is a team of 3, not 2. Chris is the enigma behind the scenes, and he is responsible for the visuals and graphics, but he also plays a huge role in the creative process. This project would not work without him. So from all 3 of us, it's been a business doing pleasure with you. Join us again next week for another episode of Between Two
Two
Dumbbells.
Dumbbells.
Loading TeamSKIP. Loading TeamSKIP.